Okay, today we're going to talk about spheres, and we're going to look at both surface area and volume. So I've given you some definitions up at the top there. Basically a sphere, it's like a ball, like a three-dimensional circle. The radius is going to be the same measure as a circle, where it comes from the center to the edge. Hemisphere is half a sphere. And now the great circle, if you were to take a cross section, so if you remember when we studied cross sections, if we were to cut that sphere in half, let me fix that word a little bit. If we were to cut that sphere in half, we would see a circle. And so when you look at that circle, you are thinking of a two-dimensional or just a regular circle. So sometimes we'll use that in our calculations. So you can see that the formula here, we're going to start with volume. The formula here for volume of a sphere is 4/3 times pi times r cubed. Now we haven't done anything with cubed values yet, so that part's going to be new. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one. Find the volume of the sphere. Give your answer in terms of pi. So we're going to start by writing out the formula. And then we're going to plug in. So if we have 4/3 pi, now we need r, and we're given 24 as the diameter. So you're going to have to plug in 12. You're going to cube it. And so when you go through the math, after you cube 12, I would recommend dealing with 4/3. I would recommend viewing 4/3. You can type that in as a fraction, or you can type into your calculator. You can multiply by 4, divide by 3. That's another way to keep from rounding that particular fraction. So if we take 12 to the third power, and then we multiply by 4, divide by 3, or just multiply by 4/3, we get 2,304. And we are still in terms of pi, and since we're working with volume, we want cubic units. Okay, so that would be our just straightforward plugging into our formula. Okay, so let's move on to number 2. Number 2 says find the diameter of a sphere when you know the volume is 36,000 pi. So since I know the answer to volume, I'm going to actually start out with plugging that into my formula. So when I'm going to start with my volume is 36,000 pi, and that's equal to my formula, 4/3 pi r cubed. So there's 4/3 pi. Now we need to find the value of diameter. Well, what I'm going to do first is solve for radius, and then I will be able to work through it. So first thing I would probably do, there's a number of ways to do this. But first of all, recognize that you can, your pi, when you divide off pi on both sides, they simply cancel out. So I'm just going to come through here and cancel out my pi's. Next step, I need to divide off 4/3. You can either divide by 4/3 or multiply by 3/4. Okay, so when we do that, whatever method you choose, we end up with 27,000. So I have 27,000 equals r cubed. So what I need to do is figure out, if it were r squared, I would simply square root both sides. But when I do r cubed, I have to do what's called the cubed root. So I am looking for something that when you multiply it by itself 3 times, you get 27,000. So a simple example would be, let's just talk about 2 to the third power. We know that 2 to the third power is 8. So if I were given the equation x to the third equals 8, the answer would be 2. Because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, and that's the cubed or the third root. Now, the way we do this on our calculator on a more difficult one is we need to take the cubed root. And when I write this on paper, it's going to look like this. I am going to put a square root symbol above it, but I don't want to do the square root. I'm going to put a tiny 3 right there. And so that means over here, I'm going to take the cubed root of that number. So my calculator has a function that looks like this. Instead of square root, you have another key that has a tiny x and then a square root. This is the one we want. So you have to enter on the blue calculators, you have to enter the number, this number you're going to take the root of. So we would enter a 3, and then we would hit that cubed root button, and then we would enter 27,000 and hit equals. And so once we do that, you might pause the video to find your function on your calculator. You're going to get 30. So I'm looking for diameter, so I know I just need to double that. So diameter is 60 centimeters, and that is my answer. Okay, I'm going to do one more with you, and then I'm going to have you try one. So find the volume of the hemisphere. Now, my volume formula is still the 4/3 pi r cubed, but when I want half of that, I want a hemisphere, I'm going to multiply that by a half. So I can multiply it on the front end or the back end. So I'm going to come through here and do 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times 15 to the 3rd power. So when I key all of that in, and if you want to pause the video to make sure you're able to get it, you're going to get 2,250 pi, and our unit is meters cubed. So that is our volume. Okay, so I would like you to go on and pause the video, do number 4. This will be secret question number 1. So if you want to go ahead and take care of that now and pause it, you can do that. Okay, let's switch gears here and look at surface area. Surface area formula, we are looking at the formula 4 times pi times r squared. So let's take a look at number 1. Number 1, find the surface area with the diameter of 76. Give your answer in terms of pi. So formula is 4 pi r squared. So when I plug in, 4 is a constant, pi is the constant. Now the diameter is 76, so I only want radius, so I have to divide that by 2, which gives me 38, and then I'm going to square it. So when I run through the math, you should end up with 5,776 pi, and we are working with centimeters. And remember, surface area is units squared. Okay, so that is our first problem. Okay, number 6. Number 6 says, find the volume of a sphere with surface area of 324 pi inches squared. Give your answer in terms of pi. So I wanted to find volume. So I make sure I'm focusing on the correct formula, and we were doing 4/3 pi r cubed. Now when I look at that, the only variable is r. So what I need to do is figure out how to find my radius from surface area. So I'm going to come over here and think about my surface area formula, 4 pi r squared. And if I know my surface area, I'm going to begin there. So I'm going to start with 324 pi. That is equal to 4 pi r squared. So I need to solve for r, and I can do that. That's my only variable. Pi on both sides, you can divide both sides by pi, or you can go ahead and take a shortcut and cancel out pi from both sides. Then I can see I want to divide by 4. Divide by 4. So when I divide by 4 on both sides, I get 81. So I now have 81 equals r squared. And then we know when we want to take get rid of r squared, we come through here and square root both sides, and r is equal to 9. Now I can proceed with my volume formula. So I can now do 4/3 times pi times 9 cubed. And so, like I said, you could do 9 cubed times 4 divided by 3, and you should end up with 972 pi. And this is volume, so I want a cubic unit. So I've got inches cubed. And that is our answer. Okay, so let's move on to one problem dealing with this great circle I talked about earlier. So it says here, find the surface area of a sphere with a great circle that has an area of 49 pi. So I'm trying to find surface area, so I'm going to start there so I know what numbers I need. So I need 4 pi r squared. So I need radius. Now, if that's my great circle, that is basically a circle. And if I know the area of that circle, I can come over here and say, well, area of a circle is pi r squared. And if my area is 49 pi, I can set that equal to pi r squared. And now I can solve for r. So I'll come through here, Pi's on both sides, they cancel out, and then we can solve for r by square rooting both sides. So we get r is 7. So now I can come over here to my surface area and plug in my 7. And so I can do 7 squared, multiply by 4, and then if I leave it in terms of pi, I will end up with 196 pi miles squared. And that is my surface area. Okay, what we're going to do here, we're going to finish with a composite shape where we need to find surface area and volume, and we're going to give our answer in terms of pi. So I'm going to do surface area with you. So I'm looking at 4 pi r squared. Now, what I have here, first of all, that's of a sphere. So what I have here, though, is I have half of a sphere, right? And then I also have a full cylinder. So I can be thinking, well, if I take half of my sphere and add cylinder to it, that will give me part of my surface area. But I don't want the top of the sphere, or I'm sorry, the top of the cylinder. This circle right here on my cylinder is hidden. So I only want the bottom one base. So I'm going to write over here, I want one base. And so if I take half my sphere, that will be fine for surface area, but I only want one base in my cylinder. So if I think of my surface area formula for a sphere, I only want half times 4 pi r squared. Now my cylinder, think way back to cylinders, formula was 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi rh. But if I only want one base, I'm going to come through here. I don't want the 2, I just want it to be a 1. So I can leave it as pi r squared plus 2 pi rh. Okay, so let's go in here and let's work through the process. So I'm going to start here. So I'm going to do 1/2. Of course, I can take half of 4 and just write 2 there if I wanted to. Radius, I'm going to use this 12 right here because it's the same diameter over there and I want a 6. So I'm going to do 6 squared. So pi times 6 squared plus 2 pi times 6. Height is shown to be 9. So this process should get me what I need. So what over here, I'm going to do this partially at a time. If I do 6 squared is 36, and then I'm going to multiply that by 2, so I get 72 pi. So I've got 36 pi again over here because of 6 squared. And then I need to do 2 times 6 times 9, which gives me 108 pi. And so if I do 108 plus 36 plus 72, that will give me 216 pi. So that should be my surface area. And so I need a unit, inches squared. So that's going to be surface area. Okay, I would like you to do volume, and that will be secret question number 2. So finish volume, and then you go ahead and go back to Edmodo, click on the whisk, and I'd like you to submit that and have that all ready for class on Tuesday.